Before we get into what dyslexia is, I think it's important that we dispel some of the myths of dyslexia because they are everywhere. So the first myth is that dyslexia is not real. You'll hear this sometimes, that dyslexia does not exist, and this is false. There's been over 30 years of documented scientific evidence and research that proves the existence of dyslexia. Dyslexia is very rare. This is false. The United States Department of Health and Human Services estimates that 15% of the U.S. population has dyslexia. It is one of the most common causes of reading difficulties in elementary school children. 80% of children who receive services for learning disabilities have dyslexia. Dyslexia can be cured or outgrown. This is false. Dyslexia is a lifelong neurological condition. It happens in the brain. You can see it in the brain. Dyslexia can certainly be remediated, which means that if you use the right techniques with a person with dyslexia, they can learn to read. They can create new neural pathways in their brain that are more effective. But they will always have dyslexia. It is a lifelong condition. People with dyslexia can't read. This is false. Since dyslexia occurs on a continuum, most people with dyslexia can read, at least up to a certain basic level. For some people with dyslexia, the first sign is actually often a spelling problem rather than a reading problem. All children with dyslexia will have the same struggles. This is false. Since dyslexia occurs on a continuum, you can have one child that has mild dyslexia, while another student can have severe to profound dyslexia. So it can look very differently in each child. Some kids are just late bloomers. Give them time and their reading skills will improve on their own. This is false. If a student is struggling when they're younger, they're going to be struggling when they're older. There's something called the Matthews effect, and it's often summarized as the old adage, the rich get rich and the poor get poorer. And this happens in reading as well. So what you'll see this expanding achievement gap. If you have a child that's struggling early on without remediation, without the necessary intervention, they're going to continue to struggle. And if you have a student that's a high achiever in the early grades, they're going to continue to do well. And this gap between the two groups widens considerably as they get into the higher grades. So early remediation can close that gap. And each year that you wait, it gets harder and harder to close that gap. Students in the 4th grade, it takes 4 times as long to remediate them as a student in kindergarten. And we don't have unlimited time with these kids. So every year that is spent not getting the remediation, it's going to take longer and it's going to be harder to close that achievement gap. It's never too late for remediation. If you have a student that's older, don't get discouraged. It's never too late for remediation, but the ideal time for interventions to start is when a child is very young. Kids with dyslexia are just lazy. This is false. And what's so heartbreaking about this one is kids with dyslexia actually use nearly 5 times the brain area as their peers when performing a simple language task. They're actually working 5 times harder than the other students to do the same task. And this is why they're exhausted when they come home from school and why they sometimes fight so hard not to do homework because they're done. They're tired. Their brain is just fried. So this one is false.